if you read that book, you can see his heart and soul.
Absolutely.
And I just asked Laurie to say a few authorly words.
Well, thank you, Minister, first of all, for those sage words, and thank you all for coming. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we gather today, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. So there are currently 68 million people displaced across the globe. That's the most there's ever been in history, and the result of more regional conflicts than this planet has ever seen. At the same time, the opportunities to settle those people are fewer than they were last year or even 10 years ago. In 2018, less than 5% of the people that the United Nations deemed in dire need of resettlement, in vulnerable circumstances, actually found a safe haven in a third country. So it's never been more important that refugee stories are heard. And so this book is an attempt to give refugees a voice. And in doing so, we've tried as much as possible to try and tell these stories in the words of the people who are sharing them with us. And we hope that ordinary Australians will gain some insight into what it means to be a refugee, into the reasons why people come to Australia as refugees, and why we have a responsibility to afford them sanctuary. But I guess the book is also an acknowledgement of Australia's generous and sophisticated refugee settlement programs. Notwithstanding the issues around asylum seekers and offshore processing, we have some amazing, both formally funded and also, ad hoc programs run by volunteers. We at AIMS, from first-hand knowledge, know that Australians generally, and particularly Victorians, are very welcoming of migrants and refugees. And Victoria particularly is something of a magnet for refugees because of the welcome that they receive from ordinary people, but also because of the services that the state provides. And I think it's important to recognise that. So lastly, I'd just like to thank all of the people who have generously and courageously shared their stories with us. Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you, Laurie. And of course, working with AIMS, I should say that we have here today the Chairman Stuart. Put your hand up. You can't get away from it. Just sitting. Put your hand up. There he is. So there he is, Chairman. And we also have Kath, who's the CEO. You put your hand up so we can see you there. Right. Okay. Now, of course, AIMS does just magnificent work. If you think about people, if you think that you just arrive in a country and where do you go, how do you get help? Yeah. And here's AIMS. It is just basically a light on the hill. I know people use that for other reasons, but the light on the hill here for people coming from overseas in all sorts of circumstances really is AIMS, and such fantastic work that's been done for a long period of time. Now, we have a very special person who's come today to give us a little talk, and Malika, I'll let you tell your story, please.
Thank you.
Good morning, Honourable Minister and brothers and sisters. First, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land and pay my respect to their elders, past, present, future, and all elders who are here with us in this room. My name is Malika Shkhaddin, and I am originally from Eritrea. First, I would like to say no one wants to be a refugee, but it can happen. So for me, I have never thought that one day I'll be a refugee. I was from a middle class family, having education, and all my dreams was, to finish my, university studies go overseas, get married, having children, and so on. But all these dreams were cancelled in a very short period of time, where there was, like war was raging in Eritrea at that time between Ethiopia and Eritrea, and I suddenly had to leave university where I was doing first year, studies on medicine, and my goal was to be a doctor, medical doctor. So I had to leave everything and just, like with all the waves of refugees who were fleeing, I had to join them, and I arrived at the Sudanese border, not knowing where my parents or my family were. So I had to join the refugees at the camp, and as with other students. So we were there just, try to help whomever we can, the elderly, and imagine, in that situation where there were, like pregnant women, children, elderly, and so on. So you don't know what to do with very limited resources, and only the few NGOs who were there, to support. Being there, it just changed my mind, because from being a person who focused on myself, then it's how can I do, or what can I do, to help others. So that was, the start of changing, my personality and my focus as well. So we were lucky that the UNHCR came to the refugee camp and asked, like, who wants to continue, to take the opportunity to go to university. So a few of us, we said, why not? We did the aptitude test, but unfortunately, although we got very high marks, they said, oh, you can't do medicine or engineering and so on because you are a refugee. So we had to go for the other options. For me, at that time, being a refugee, I didn't, I wasn't imagining that it will take that long to go back home. So I thought, that first thing, okay, Eritrea's main resource is fisheries. We have the Red Sea, so I have to study fisheries. And I took zoology. I graduated with first degree honors, and I went, because when I applied for jobs in the Sudan, even because the Sudan themselves, they had problems, I couldn't find anything. So I had to volunteer and go back to join the revolution. So I went, and I stayed there for a year, just, raising, giving, some classes and so on, and helping the villages, there just for as far as health is concerned and so on, just raise awareness. But then also I was lucky again, because I was in the record of the UNHCR, and UNHCR opened a secondary school in the border town or city called Kassala. So I was asked, to teach there, and it was my opportunity, at least, to give, or to help, other refugees to achieve their goals. And I'm happy to say that the students I taught in that school are now the medical doctors I aspire to be. So they are in the
Amazing.
So then I was given another opportunity. I applied through the World University Services in Geneva, and I got a scholarship. My husband at that time, he was in the front lines, so I had to take our 3 children, and I went to Egypt, because in Sudan there was no opportunities. So I just went to Egypt. I did my master's degree in marine biology, mainly focusing on native Australian, Red Sea fish. And then, and also at the time, there was an influx of refugees from Sudan, from Somalia, and so I was there to help, and Ethiopia as well. So I was there, to help them and to volunteer and help them. And there is, the St. Andrews Refugee Center, and I was there, volunteering with them to help other refugees. I was lucky to be given the opportunity to apply for resettlement and choose, between Australia, Canada, and America. Then I had to do my homework.
Did you make the right choice?
Yeah, of course.
Of course you made the right choice.
Yeah, and the most important thing is I just fell in love with kangaroos, so I was, to see the kangaroos. Yeah, so I'm lucky to have made that choice. Since I came to Australia, I was, my first job was to be an interpreter, and I didn't know that interpreting was a job. So, just helping. So I started, interpreting for the people that were with me, who were from Eritrea and from Sudan and so on. And someone told me, but what you are doing is a job, so why don't you apply as a Department of Immigration and get it? So I got that opportunity, but always in my head was, to have my highest degree that I promised myself to have. So I applied and I got accepted at Deakin University to do, a PhD degree, and I moved to Warrnambool, and Warrnambool is my hometown.
Wow.
Because that's where, they made me feel at home when home was Southern Zone.
That's fantastic.
So, yeah, and my children, my 3 children now, they graduated, but they always see Warrnambool as their hometown, because that's where they have their childhood.
Beautiful.
Yeah, now I'm working at AIMS. My first job, was at AIMS. Yeah, so I started, only for half a day, and now I'm managing the International and Community Development Unit, and I represent AIMS and Australia internationally as the annual UNHCR consultations in Geneva. I have been doing this since 2007. I am a member of the Refugee Council of Australia. I am a member of the Labour Party as well.
Oh.
Richard's already got a seat for you.
This is getting better by the minute. What a story. What a story.